Hello, did you know that 1 in 4 women claim to be in a domestic abusive relationship, and that statistic tends to be higher in the church? Hello, my name is Michele Armstrong, and I seek to empower women to live victoriously and overcome broken circumstances based on my experience in a domestically abusive marriage to a minister. So first of all, what I wanted to talk about a little bit is that many times women don't even know that they are in an abusive relationship. That's because they have been groomed and they have been taught to believe that this is just the way it is and this is the way it's always going to be. Domestic abuse comes in a lot of different forms, and so we're going to be talking about that today. But before that, I wanted to kind of give you a little backstory about me. I was married to a minister for 30 years. I married him at 18, met him at 16, and became engaged to him at 17, which should have been a red flag right there. He was 29 years old when we became engaged, and so basically he felt he could raise me. I did not know what domestic abuse was. I had no idea the definition of it, and I certainly didn't know that I was in a domestically abusive relationship. So when I started realizing that things were at least different, I never termed it as abuse until after I left, almost 30 years later. And so that is the reason that I'm starting this series on domestic abuse and starting this video, is because I want women to understand, or actually everyone to understand, what domestic abuse looks like, and especially as it pertains to Christian marriage, because that's where many times domestic abuse is hidden. We're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to even deal with the subject in a healthy way. And so I'm trying to change that, and I'm trying to empower churches to be able to deal with it in a healthy way, and for women and men that are in domestic abusive relationships to be able to come out and be victorious in that. So first of all, I'm coming to you from Family Tree Candle Company. This is a friend of mine here in Knoxville, Tennessee. She has an adorable candle shop. My local friends, you need to come check it out. It's beautiful here. So many candles and other gifts. So it's a candle and gift shop here on the Solway at Pellissippi Parkway. So would love to have you stop in and check her out. She's so awesome to let me use this space today. So when I married at 18 years old and my husband was 30, I began seeing signs. Actually, I started seeing the signs before we got married, but I didn't know what I was looking at. And so the day that I married him, I actually felt like I was heading for doom. And that's not a normal feeling that women feel on their wedding day. I just supposed that it was pre-wedding jitters, and I just had no idea what in the world I was looking at. So as time went on, I started seeing things that were completely erratic and frightening, whether he would punch holes in walls or scream in rage and break windshields or hit himself, all those different kinds of things. And because he wasn't actually punching me or hitting me, I did not know that I was in an abusive relationship. So first of all, as I look back, I know that I had been groomed, because abusers, just as in my case, abusers are very charming. They are able to turn on the charm. They're able to be very endearing. They make people feel like, that they are so important in their lives and that sort of thing. And so victims begin being groomed. And in my case, I was not the only victim. Even my family, my parents and my family were in this abusive relationship, unfortunately, with me also. And because they had been groomed too, because charm and just being able to command a room when they walk into the room, those sorts of traits are characteristic of abusers. But as time went on, I started seeing the other side, the dark side, the raging side, and it was extremely terrifying. And back in the early 80s, a movie came out called The Burning Bed, and I had been married approximately about a year at that time. And The Burning Bed is a story of a woman who is in a physically abusive relationship, amongst all of the other abusive traits also. But And so I started watching that one day, and I, for some reason, was very concerned because I realized I knew how she felt. And yet I could not put a finger on, well, he doesn't hit me, he doesn't punch me, he doesn't do the things that I'm seeing on TV. Why can I connect with her? Why can I relate with this woman on television who happened to be Farrah Fawcett? She was still quite a spectacle at that time. But anyway, so I watched that show, and it was very concerning to me. But as the years went on, I just started accepting it. And that's what happens with the victims, is they start just accepting it as normal. And also it is a survival tactic that happens in the brain and the mind and the heart, so that it doesn't seem so, it's easier to handle. And you don't seem like it's so weird. And if you accept it as normal, then you're able to deal with it. And even though it's not a healthy way to deal with it, you're still able to at least function in life. And so I lived through that for 30 years. And so now I'm going to tell you about some of the things that I experienced, and then connect it to the different forms of abuse. So the first one, of course, is physical, and that's very obvious. That includes punching, choking, biting, grabbing, pushing, any of those sorts of things. I didn't experience as much of that, although I did. He did grab me at times, one time extremely bruising my face and arms and neck and that sort of thing. He ripped a dress that I had on from his rage. He did push me at times. I one time was basically held captive in a hotel room by him. So those sorts of, and that actually is a felony if it comes down to it, to be held against your will like that. That's called false imprisonment. So that's a form of physical abuse also. So those are very obvious, but here's where the catch comes in, is that so many women are in abusive relationships and they don't know it because they're not being punched, they're not being hit, they're maybe not even being grabbed, they're not being pushed, any of those things. So the next one is mental and emotional abuse. Now, many times the physical and the mental and emotional go together, of course. That only makes sense. But there are times when the physical is separate and then just the emotional and mental abuse takes place, and women don't recognize that they're in it, or they don't know how to express it because you're so confused by it, you don't even know that how to tell somebody about it. There's no way that I could articulate what I was going through at the time, especially as young as I was. So that sort of thing includes threats. In my case, he would threaten me that he was going to go to a church and quit a job because he was a minister, or that he was going to take things before the church, or that he was going to, as my children came along, that he would threaten me with making their lives miserable somehow, or threaten all kinds of things like that. Now, some women actually experience death threats, and I never experienced that. There are women that have experienced abuse much more than me, in much graver circumstances. But there aren't many that are going to speak out about it. So, of course, the first one was physical. We have mental and emotional. Another way that emotional abuse takes place is just a constant pressure on you to perform. You feel like you're walking on eggshells to stay ahead of his rage, or to make sure that you do everything right. You're constantly analyzed and criticized, and there's every step you take is he has to watch, that sort of thing. You may end up feeling like you can't do anything right. You may end up feeling in fear all the time that you're going to trip up or you're going to mess up, and that is a form of abuse. I now am in a healthy marriage, and I never feel that way. I know that I can express my emotion. I know that I can express when I disagree, and I never had that luxury when I was married in the past. I could not express my opinion. I could not tell him that I disagreed. I could not express emotion. I had to keep it all boxed up and hidden, and so he never really even knew who I was. Basically, all he knew is that I like to go out and eat. But he didn't know me. He didn't know the root of me. We couldn't even carry on conversations at times because I was always afraid. I was afraid of his reaction. So that is emotional and mental abuse. And of course, like I said, that can go in conjunction with the physical abuse, because if you are also being physically abused, then of course the pressure to perform becomes much more. And I have stories you would not believe of, in the church, women being physically, mentally, emotionally abused. There are other forms of this emotional abuse, and one is called gaslighting. And that comes from a movie that was made back in I believe in the 50s, and it is a term that we use because the person takes your mind and starts manipulating your mind and making you think that you've done things that you haven't done, or that you've said things in the wrong way that could be perceived that you've done something wrong when really you didn't do any of that. Or they make you think that everything is your fault, or they make you think that you need to live in fear of other people, or that you need to be careful of your family because they're going to influence you in the wrong way. In my case, it was very difficult for me to have friendships because my ex-husband would judge the friends and say, well, they're not spiritual enough for you. And sometimes it was because I think he knew that those people would figure him out. And so it was very hard for me to have friends through the years. Thank God there have been a few that have come into my life that I was able to let in a little bit, although when I was going through that, I never was allowed in my mind to have a close friendship, because when people get too close, then they're going to figure out what's going on. And even though I didn't mentally know that it was abuse, I still knew that there was something off that I wanted to hide. And if you're hiding something in your relationship, whether it's dating or marriage, or even between children and parents, whether any kind of relationship like that, friends, co-workers, if you're experiencing any of these things where you feel fear, or you feel like you're being excluded, or you feel like you're being made a victim in any way, then you need to get help, and you need to start recognizing these signs. So another form of abuse is verbal. So that seems pretty obvious. However, women and men get so used to hearing these terminologies, and it's always sometimes passed off as a joke or that sort of thing. So, but anything that demeans you, anything that anyone speaks over you that is demeaning to you, whether they call you stupid or dumb or ugly or fat, or that you do something wrong all the time, or that you're not a good mother or not a good father, or that you're not a good friend, and you just feel manipulated and confused. So that is verbal, because when they start speaking those things over you, that's actually forming your self-image and forming your value and your worth through their words. So don't let anyone speak down to you in that way. And then another form is spiritual abuse. Now that is something that is very common in the church, and that is what I experienced a lot of. So how that happens is men or women use scripture to get out of you what they want, or to put you in your place, or to make sure that you adhere to all of their wishes, because in an abusive relationship, at least in my situation, my husband's wishes were God's wishes and vice versa. If I was pleasing my husband, I was pleasing God. And that is a false conception. Don't ever let anyone talk you into doing things that are off in your mind. Because if anybody is crossing those boundaries, and you need to set boundaries, and if anyone is crossing those boundaries, including a Christian husband, and when I say crossing boundaries, I think we know, I'm trying to be very clear on this, we're talking about boundaries that God instills in us. When they're crossing those boundaries, then you need to put a stop to it. And if you don't know how to do that, then you need to get help. Another way that abusers abuse their victims is through sexual abuse. Now, I know that is not a common thought, especially in Christian marriage, but I want you to understand that sexual abuse does occur in Christian marriage. And that can be through all kinds of forms. In my case, I was coerced and manipulated and forced and pressured into watching pornography, into acting in ways and speaking in ways that were totally against my nature, totally against my judgment, totally against my conscience even. But I knew that if I didn't do that, that I was going to suffer some sort of punishment or wrath or pouting or pressure, or he, wasn't going to be able to make it through his ministry or whatever it was. So there are all kinds of ways that sexual abuse can be exemplified in marriage. And that devalues you. When you end up feeling like a porn queen or porn king, however the case may be, when you end up feeling like that you are violating yourself or that you are being violated in any way, that is sexual abuse. And it doesn't matter if you're married or not. And I know all of the verses that say, well, your body is not yours, it's his. And I get that. But we all know that scriptures of all kinds can be abused. And that is what is happening. Because women feel like they're slaves, or that they're required to give things sexually to their spouse that is not biblical. God did not intend for sex to be that way, and he did not intend for his daughters and his sons to be treated in any such way. I especially speak to women because that is, of course, what I am and how I experienced abuse. And so when I use the term women, please know that I know that it can occur both ways. So another form of abuse is financial abuse. Now, if you feel like that you have no say with your finances, or that you're afraid to spend money. And when I say that, I'm talking about imbalance. I'm not talking about, that you go out and you're being extravagant with your money and you're buying things that you can't afford and, maybe shopping addicted and all of that. I'm talking about just normal everyday finances. If you feel like you have no say in your finances, if you feel that you cannot spend money without getting in trouble, or if maybe you're given a small allowance, and there again, I'm talking about when people don't have a balance in this. If you feel that you're being violated financially, then you're probably in a financially abusive situation. And many times that's part of what keeps women in an abusive relationship, is that they don't have any financial control. They know that they'll be stripped of everything. In my situation, I didn't really have anything anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. However, when you get ready to leave, if you decide to, and I cannot tell a person when to leave, I cannot tell you if you should leave, I cannot advise you in that whatsoever, but I knew when my ex-husband nearly killed both of us by chasing me in a vehicle and running off the road and flipping his car and all of that, I knew that I had to get out. I also knew that I didn't have any kind of skills to be able to have a job. I had no college experience. I had basically no work experience except for demonstrating food in a grocery store. So I didn't have any way to be able to provide myself that I know of. But here's the thing. God is the ultimate provider. And if you see that you need to leave to be safe or to get mentally healthy or whatever it might be, whether it's for a short period of time or permanently, then just trust the Lord that it's going to work out. I cannot tell you how many women that I have worked with that I've watched them come out on the other side, leaving an abusive relationship, and God provides for them, sometimes almost miraculously. In my situation, I was ready to ride a bicycle if that's what it took to be able to get to and from a job of some sort. I didn't care what kind of job. There wasn't a job too menial at the time. So although I didn't have to do any of that, and I did have precious parents that I was able to go to and stay with them for a while, and then I had a friend that provided me a job that I was able to care for myself. But I'm just telling you, there are some things that are not worth your mental health or your physical well-being, and that is finances. there are ways to be able to provide for yourself. There are shelters available, all of that. So please don't let finances be the deciding factor for you. I know some women have children that they have to provide for, and that adds a whole nother layer. And so everybody has to use wisdom, and God will give you wisdom if you ask for it. So just to kind of sum it up, there's physical, there's mental and emotional, there is verbal, there is sexual and spiritual and financial abuse. And if you're suffering any of those, I advise you to please get help. And I will tell you this, that exposure, it disempowers, if that's the word, takes the power away from the enemy. Every time that it is exposed, it empowers you more. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't safety issues with some situations that need to be taken into consideration. I'm not even dealing with that. But what I'm saying is you've got to get help somewhere. You need to go talk to a friend. You need to go talk to a preacher or even a counselor. However, I will tell you that many times counselors, preachers, pastors, well-meaning people, because of trying to save the marriage at all costs, they will give you the advice, the erroneous advice, to stay in spite of any circumstances. And I'm telling you that that is not your only option. And so you need to seek God with all of this. But what I'm doing today is just helping you understand whether you're in an abusive relationship, whether you have been, whether you're looking into getting into a relationship and you need to know what abuse looks like. I'm here to just help you understand that and to help you know that abusers can be very charming, they are very deceitful, they are manipulative, they can charm the birds right out of the trees, they can make you think that they hung the moon, and then on the other side there's a very dark side. And so don't fall into the trap of the charm, because that fades away quickly. Once they have you in their grasp, and they will groom you, they'll make you feel like you're the most beautiful woman or the most handsome man on the planet. They'll make you feel like y'all are gonna go through the horizon, and I'm just telling you that I had all kinds of promises made. I had all kinds of dreams and hopes dashed because of the abuse and because I didn't understand what it was I was going through. And many people watching this video, you may not be able to use the word abuse in your situation. I get that. I was at the same point. I did not use the word abuse until months after I left. But you now know, or you're at least a little more educated in what abuse looks like. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you want to type a question in the comments, if you want to drop a like, if you want to comment and just tell me that you're here, that would be awesome. If you're watching the replay, you can do the same thing. Maybe I can deal with questions in future videos. I'm hoping to do this every 2 weeks on Monday at noon. So it'll be 2 weeks from today that I will be doing another one. I'll give notification of that as we go along. So the next video, I hope we'll be able to even impart more into what abuse looks like, and also maybe telling you more about my story and how I came out on the other side. And I just want to go along this journey with you. Thank goodness, thank God, He has been able to use my story. Other women have been able to come alongside, and we've been able to lock arms and walk through this together. I've watched incredible victories happen in women's lives that were basically miraculous. One woman in an abusive relationship is now starting her own insurance agency. It's just, some of the stories are absolutely incredible. So I love y'all very much. Please know that these videos do not come from a place of unforgiveness. I have forgiven my abuser. I am healthy and whole on the other side, and that's what I want for everyone else. That's why I share these things. It's not to throw anyone under the bus. It's not to get revenge. It's not to get vengeance or anything like that. It is only to empower and to create awareness so that we can deal with this subject in a healthy way in the church, because I want the church to be a safe place. And I don't mean safe just physically, I mean safe in every way, because many times when women have gone to the church, they have been given the wrong advice, or they've been victimized again by well-meaning people, but they get re-victimized because they're like, what did you do? What could you have done better? Can you improve yourself? Can you forgive more? Can you have more sex? Can you give more grace? Can you, just all of those things. And it's not about the victim. I want you to understand, abuse is about the abuser and what they need to do to correct themselves. And then the victims need to find help and grace and source of healing and comfort, and that is through Jesus Christ. And I'm praying that the churches in general will be able to embrace these victims and give them safety and comfort and hope and love and grace and all of those things that the Holy Spirit empowers us with. So I love y'all very much, and hopefully you'll join me in a couple more weeks. And again, thank you so much, Meg, for letting me use your adorable candle and gift shop here at Family Tree Candle Company in Knoxville, Tennessee. Y'all have a blessed day.